Welcome back, everyone, to the Bitcoin Business Bureau. I'm your host, as always, LitecoinLeader. Today, we're going to talk about foreign countries. We're going to talk about how they handle currency and its banking issues and what they're doing to create an alternative financial system contrary to the global financial system that exists right now based on the petrodollar. So what am I talking about? What countries are we talking about? I'll get to that in a moment. But before I forget, because I forget all the time, please like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell over in the corner, which is down. Don't do this. If you don't like the video, hey, hit this or hit it twice. I don't care. But I like these two. So, and also in the corner, which I think is right here, the video. There we go. Over here is the notification bell. Any way you can get notified about these videos, like, share, subscribe, helps out the channel. Also, share this video to someone who may benefit from it. Helps the channel as well. So, and I like comments too. Now let's get to the content. So let me share my screen, go over a tweet and an article, and then we'll talk about it in a moment. So first off, this is a tweet, and this was all over Twitter yesterday. And this is, in case you didn't know, President Xi of China and President Putin of Russia have been meeting for the last couple of days. And this is one of the takeaways. So first off here, this is a quote that came out a lot yesterday, and there's a clip that's about 45 seconds long. I'll try to remember to put the link to this tweet into the video. But Putin basically said, we are in favor of using the Chinese yuan for settlements between Russia and the countries of Asia, Africa, and Latin America. I am confident that these forms of settlement in yuan will develop between Russian partners and their counterparts in third countries. So that basically says that Russia's working with lots of other countries through the yuan, through the ruble, with a gold-backed currency, with all these other Asia, Africa, Latin America, and they're already settling more transactions with China in the yuan than anything else. So the petrodollar is dying very, very fast, if not dead already. So the other article here, Russia ready to switch to yuan in foreign trade. Settlements between Moscow and Beijing are already carried out mostly in national currencies, the Russian president says. So we are for the use of Chinese yuan settlements, but that same quote as earlier. 2/3 of current trade between Moscow and Beijing is carried out in national currencies, the yuan and the ruble. China's trade with Russia hit a record high in 2022. It's on pace to go over 200 billion this year. So it's a big deal. It's a big deal that's going on. And it's important to note that, meanwhile, the share of the US dollar and euro in Russia's export settlements last year dropped substantially from 65 in January 2022 to 46% in December. So between whatever they were doing as far as trying to prevent Russia of dealing in the SWIFT system and any sanctions and the rules that they were putting down to limit Russia as far as foreign trade, Russia found a way around it. And it's backed by gold and it's growing. So you've got two of the largest countries in the world, Russia and China, dealing in rubles and the yuan. So the ruble's tied to gold. We know that already. Yuan has a bond market, has easily digitized, and has a form of CBDC they're working on too. But you've got all these international settlements that are basically, they all trace back to gold. So you can make a very strong argument that Russia and China have set a new gold standard across the planet, and the petrodollar-based countries are behind the times now, and they are struggling. And you could see all the struggles that were happening just from all the bank issues, from the inflation that's going on, and be able to fund anything right now, debt ceilings that are being hit, lots of issues that are happening. So while the Western media is not covering the meeting between Putin and Xi, and if they do talk about it, they're talking about how this is bad for Ukraine and how the war is going to continue, all those different angles. They're not talking about the economic part of that meeting, which is huge. Those two are meeting and they're pressing forward with their relations. They're building, they're building, well, you could say the Belt and Road, but you could say they're building relationships together to trade and tie. I think China is now the largest consumer of Russian oil is China. Right? I think China is the number one import of China. The number one country that they deal with getting their oil, the number one supplier of oil is Russia, which makes sense because they're neighbors. Okay, but to transact, it's very simple with using the ruble and the yuan. They just transact in those currencies and they settled in those currencies. So they're getting away from the dollar. The dollar is no longer the world reserve currency. That is bad for all of the banking that's out there in Europe, in the US, in Australia, in Japan, all these countries that like basically married themselves to the dollar system, they're either trying to get away, like Saudi Arabia is, by joining BRICS, as is Russia, India, China, South Africa, Brazil, Latin America. Latin America is pretty much going to be a battleground between what's happened in El Salvador in the last 2 years, going to Bitcoin, other countries looking to get away from the dollar, because a lot of them, they had currency issues the last 20 years, and they had huge inflation problems. Inflation is going bad in Argentina again. It's almost 100%. But to get back to the core story, all these nations across the globe are getting away from the US dollar. They're moving to an alternative currency. Could be Bitcoin, could be the yuan, could be the ruble, could be gold, could be precious metal-backed currency. But that's what they're doing. They're getting away from the US dollar because the US dollar is dying. The inflation is too high. That is how El Salvador wound up being involved in Bitcoin, because before that, this was rarely asked in my digging, but it was easy to find it. People actually asked the question and looked. What was the currency for El Salvador before they adopted Bitcoin? It was the US dollar. So when the US started printing more currency and El Salvador was getting none of it except the inflationary prices, that everything priced in dollars, they said, wait a minute, we can't deal with this. So they had two choices. Well, they had three: continue with the dollar, launch their own currency, or adopt something else. They chose option 3, adopt something else. They went with Bitcoin, and now they have a Bitcoin-based system that's working pretty well for them. They've gotten out of international debt, and they're growing their country, and they're doing well. And other countries are taking notice. Last year, I think 44 countries visited El Salvador to find out more information. You had the Central African Republic adopt it. You have lots of countries that are adopting Bitcoin, lots of countries getting away from the US dollar, and lots of people that don't know about this stuff because the Western media won't talk about it, because they're protecting the dollar. So with all the interest that people have in the dollar in both Europe and the United States, and those media centers are only going to focus on positivity towards the dollar or the euro and talk negatively about any alternative currency. So that's why there's CBDCs being talked about, so they get more control, because they're losing control, because as more and more countries and more people get away from the dollar, one of their mechanisms for control is the currency system. So they need to get control back over the masses. That's what governments do. They like to control people. One of the mechanisms clearly is currency. So to avoid that, people are going to different directions, as are countries, but the government wants to install the CBDC so that everybody is forced into their system again, and they have another angle for control. So lots said today. I'd love to hear your opinions. If you're from Russia, if you're from China, if you know people in those areas, if you know people in Latin America, what are their viewpoints on the dollar? What are their viewpoints on other currencies? I'd love to hear about them. Leave a comment down below. Like, share, and subscribe. As I said earlier, it really helps out the channel. But with lots said today, I'm going to close the drawer in the bureau, say follow leader one more time, and I will talk to you soon. Take care.